Before the legions marched, before emperors ruled in marble palaces, before the name Rome echoed from the shores of Britannia to the sands of Egypt, there was nothing. No city, no empire. Just forest, hills, and river. And a myth. A riverbank. A she-wolf and two abandoned brothers. This is how the Romans told the story of their beginning, not as mere mortals born of chance, but as children of gods, destined to rule. Long before Rome's rise to glory, the Italian peninsula was a patchwork of scattered tribes and ancient peoples. In the heart of this land stood a small Latin kingdom known as Alba Longa, said to have been founded by the descendants of Aeneas, the Trojan prince who, after the fall of Troy, journeyed west and laid the seeds of a new civilization. From Aeneas's bloodline came Numitor, the rightful king of Alba Longa, but his brother, Amulius, had other plans. Ambitious and ruthless, Amulius deposed Numitor, seized the throne, and destroyed any threat to his reign. He killed Numitor's sons, and to ensure the family line would end with them, he forced Rhea Silvia to become a Vestal Virgin, a sacred priestess forbidden from marriage and childbirth under penalty of death. It should have ended there. But the gods, the Romans believed, were watching. Mars, the god of war himself, was said to have descended from the heavens, and in a moment of divine union, he fathered twins by Rhea Silvia. 2 boys, 2 heirs, Romulus and Remus. When Amulius discovered the birth, his fear turned to fury. He ordered the infants taken from their mother and drowned in the waters of the Tiber River. But the river had its own will. The basket carrying the twins washed ashore near the base of the Palatine Hill, snagged in the roots of a fig tree. There, legend says, a she-wolf, drawn by the cries of the hungry infants, found them, and instead of devouring them, she suckled them, cradled them in fur and warmth, and kept them alive. The Romans called her Lupa, and her image would become one of the most enduring symbols of Rome itself, feral, powerful, and fiercely protective of its own. Later, the twins were discovered by a shepherd named Faustulus, who, along with his wife, raised them as their own. Unaware of their royal blood, Romulus and Remus grew up in the rugged hills, hardened by a life of herding, hunting, and surviving. They became leaders among their peers, bold and rebellious, often clashing with local authorities. It was during one such clash that Remus was captured, and in seeking to free his brother, Romulus uncovered the truth of their heritage. The twins returned to Alba Longa, overthrew Amulius, and reinstated their grandfather, Numitor, as king. But the story didn't end there. Having restored their family, they now sought to forge a legacy of their own. They would build a new city, not in Alba Longa, but on the very site where the river had spared them. There, on the Palatine Hill, Romulus and Remus laid the foundations of what would become Rome. But from the beginning, the city was marked by division. The brothers argued over the location, the design, and above all, who would rule it. In some versions of the legend, they turned to a ritual of augury, watching the skies for signs from the gods. Remus claimed to see 6 vultures. Romulus saw 12. Each believed the gods had spoken in his favor. The argument turned to rage. In an act of defiance, Remus leapt over the low wall Romulus had begun to build, a symbolic gesture that mocked both Romulus's authority and the sanctity of the new city's boundaries. Romulus struck him down. "So perish anyone who leaps over my walls," he is said to have declared. Whether in sorrow or fury, Rome's founder had now become its first killer. The city's birth was not peaceful. It was forged in fratricide, brother against brother, blood spilled to sanctify stone. And so, on April 21st, 753 BCE, Romulus became Rome's first king. The city took his name. Rome was born. But was this only myth? What do we know from history and archaeology? Modern excavations reveal that by the mid-8th century BCE, several small Latin settlements clustered atop the 7 hills surrounding the Tiber River. These were no grand cities, just wooden huts with thatched roofs, hearths dug into the earth, and burial sites scattered nearby. But on the Palatine Hill, archaeologists have found post holes and traces of a communal gathering space suggesting a shared identity beginning to form. By the 7th century BCE, these scattered villages had begun to merge, unified by shared language, religion, and trade. The spot chosen by Romulus, whether by myth or wisdom, was brilliant. Rome sat at a geographic crossroads, with the Tiber River offering access to inland trade and proximity to the sea. It was rich in salt deposits, a precious resource in the ancient world. Its hills provided natural defense. Its central location positioned it as a hub between the Etruscans to the north and the Greeks to the south. From the Etruscans, Rome borrowed architecture, religious rituals, and political symbols, like the fasces, a bundle of rods symbolizing authority. From the Greeks, they adopted their alphabet, artistic styles, and mythological storytelling. Rome wasn't born from isolation, it was forged in cultural fusion. But the myth of Romulus gave the city something far more powerful than trade or tools. It gave Rome a story, a reason, a destiny. Rome was not just a city of huts and stones. It was a city chosen by the gods, born in divine fire and destined for greatness. It was a city whose very origin demanded sacrifice, whose walls were marked by blood, whose founder placed purpose above family and empire above love. This myth would echo across generations, shaping how Romans saw themselves. They were not just citizens, they were the heirs of Mars, children of wolves, people of destiny. And that belief, that unshakable faith in Rome's divine purpose, would drive them forward, across seas, through centuries, into history. The river had spared Romulus, and in doing so, it had unleashed Rome upon the world. The 7 Kings of Rome. Formation of Roman institutions, the fall of the monarchy, and birth of the Republic. After the blood of Remus soaked the earth beneath the Palatine Hill, the story of Rome truly began. Romulus stood alone, king of a city still unborn, with only wild ambition and divine myth behind him. There were no legions yet, no marble columns, no sprawling empire, just huts, hills, and a name: Rome. According to tradition, the Roman kingdom lasted 244 years, ruled by a line of 7 kings, each contributing something essential to the city's shape, its soul, and its future. Some were warriors, others were builders, and some perhaps never existed at all. But myth and history would merge, as they so often did in Rome, into a narrative the Romans would tell themselves for centuries.
that even in its infancy, Rome was destined to become more than just a city. It was an idea. Romulus, the first king, ruled from 753 BCE. He gave Rome its first laws, its first boundaries, and its first citizens, though how those citizens came to be was no gentle tale. With no women in his city of exiles, Romulus organized a festival and invited the neighboring Sabines. During the celebration, Roman men seized and carried off the Sabine women, a brutal event remembered as the rape of the Sabine women. But the story didn't end in bloodshed. According to legend, the women themselves intervened in the resulting war, placing themselves between fathers and husbands and demanding peace. From this, Rome claimed a powerful message, that even violence could be turned to unity, that enemies could become allies, that Rome was a place where outsiders could become Romans. Romulus vanished after 37 years of rule. Some said he was taken by a storm and ascended to the heavens, becoming the god Quirinus. Others whispered of assassination. But Rome had been born. Now it needed structure. The second king, Numa Pompilius, was everything Romulus was not. Where Romulus had ruled with the sword, Numa ruled with wisdom. He was said to be a Sabine, chosen for his piety and calm. Under Numa, Rome embraced religion, ritual, and law. He established the priesthoods, including the Pontifex Maximus, and organized the Roman calendar. He built temples to Janus, god of beginnings and transitions, whose doors remained open during war and closed in peace. During Numa's reign, the doors were always closed. Peace reigned. But peace would not last. The third king, Tullus Hostinius, returned Rome to its warlike roots. He was a conqueror, aggressive and ambitious. He destroyed Alba Longa, Rome's mother city, and brought its people into Rome, doubling the population. He also built the first Senate house, the Curia Hostilia, where elders would meet to guide the state. But Tullus challenged the gods. He neglected rituals and, according to legend, was struck down by Jupiter's thunderbolt for his arrogance. Next came Ancus Marcius, the fourth king, a balance of war and piety. He fortified Rome, built its first prison, and expanded control over the Tiber's mouth, securing salt routes and trade. Ancus also founded Ostia, Rome's first port city, a sign of Rome's growing vision. Not just a hilltop settlement now, but a city reaching toward the sea. With the fifth king, the monarchy changed forever. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, Tarquin the Elder, was Etruscan, a foreigner. His rise to power marked a deep Etruscan influence on Rome. Tarquin expanded the Senate, began the construction of the Cloaca Maximus, Rome's great sewer, and started work on the Circus Maximus, the vast stadium for chariot races. But more than buildings, he brought new ideas, monarchy as spectacle, as symbol. He wore purple robes and a golden crown. He redefined kingship in Rome, and not all were pleased. He was assassinated, but his death paved the way for one of the most revered rulers in Roman memory, Servius Tullius, the sixth king. Born of humble origins, or perhaps even a slave, Servius rose through merit and married into the royal family. Under his reign, Rome became something more than just a city. It became a state. He conducted the first census, dividing Roman citizens into classes based on wealth and military eligibility. This led to the formation of the Comitia Concitari, an assembly that gave Rome its first structured political representation. Servius also expanded the city, fortifying its famous 7 hills, and built the Servian Wall to protect its growing population. But greatness brought enemies, and his downfall came from within. The seventh and final king was Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. He seized the throne by murdering Servius, his own father-in-law, and ruled as a tyrant. He abolished reforms, ruled without the Senate, and surrounded himself with fear and cruelty. Tarquin completed the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, but his ambition blinded him to the storm he was creating. That storm broke with his son, Sextus Tarquinius. Sextus committed an unspeakable crime. He raped Lucretia, a noble Roman woman. Lucretia, in her anguish and shame, took her own life, but not before calling on the Roman people to demand justice. Her death ignited a fire. Led by Lucius Junius Brutus, Romans rose against the Tarquins. They banished the king, ended the monarchy, and swore never again to be ruled by a king. It was 509 BCE. The Roman Republic was born. No more crowns, no more kings, only consuls elected each year, only senators to advise and legislate, only citizens whose votes would shape the future. But the shadows of the kingdom never fully disappeared. The institutions born in those early days, the Senate, the assemblies, the census, the class divisions, would remain. Rome had transformed itself without erasing its past. It kept the rituals of Numa, the walls of Servius, the dreams of Romulus. But now those tools belonged to the people, or so they believed. The Romans would forever remember the monarchy with a mixture of reverence and revulsion. It gave them order and tyranny, civilization and cruelty. But above all, it gave them a moral lesson, that power must be checked, that no one man should rule unchallenged. This lesson would become the foundation of Roman identity, a hatred of kings, a love of the Republic. And so the kingdom fell, but Rome endured, stronger, hungrier, and now unleashed. The story of empire had not yet begun, but Rome was ready.
509 BCE. The king was gone, and with him, the crown, the scepter, the divine authority. Rome had done what few cities dared. It had overthrown a monarch and chosen to govern itself. Not as a tyranny, not as a democracy, but as something new, something uniquely Roman, a republic. From the Latin word res publica, the public thing, the republic was not a perfect system, but it was a profound shift. Power, once held by one, would now be held by many, divided, limited, shared. Or at least, that was the theory. In reality, Rome's early republic was ruled by a narrow group of elite families. The patricians, aristocratic, wealthy, and powerful, still dominated politics. But the structures they built would, over time, allow even the lowborn to shape history. Let's look at how it worked. At the top of the Roman Republic stood two consuls, elected annually. They were heads of state, generals of the army, and guardians of the Republic. Each had the power to veto the other, ensuring that no single man could dominate the state. Then came the Senate, a council of Rome's elder statesmen. Though technically an advisory body, the Senate wielded enormous influence over foreign policy, finances, and military decisions. Most senators were former magistrates, and all were patricians, at least at first. And beneath them, the popular assemblies. Citizens gathered to vote on laws, elect magistrates, and make decisions of war and peace.
But voting wasn't equal. It was weighted by class and wealth, and the wealthiest voted first. If enough of them agreed, the rest never even got to cast their votes. This was not democracy in the modern sense. It was an oligarchic republic cloaked in the language of citizen rights. But Rome would not remain frozen in aristocratic control, because beneath this rising republic, a storm was brewing. The early republic was marked by internal class conflict, a centuries-long power struggle between the patricians and the plebeians, the common people. Plebeians made up the majority of Rome's population. They were farmers, laborers, merchants, and soldiers. But they had no access to high office, no voice in the Senate, and no protection under written law. Their frustration boiled over in what became known as the Struggle of the Orders, a peaceful but persistent campaign for political equality. Their first weapon? Refusal to fight. When Rome was threatened by enemies, plebeians refused to serve in the army unless their demands were heard. It worked. In 494 BCE, the plebeians withdrew to the Sacred Mount and refused to return unless given representation. Rome, facing crisis, relented. The office of the tribune of the plebs was created. 10 officials elected by the people with the power to veto any law or action harmful to the plebeians. Tribunes were legally sacrosanct. To harm one was punishable by death. This was only the beginning. Over the next century, the plebeians would push for more reforms. The 12 Tables, Rome's first written laws, engraved on bronze and posted in public around 450 BCE. No longer would the law be secret, manipulated by aristocrats. The right to intermarry with patricians, won in 445 BCE. The right for plebeians to hold consulship, achieved in 367 BCE. And finally, in 287 BCE, the Lex Hortensia made laws passed by the plebeian assembly binding on all citizens, without Senate approval. The struggle was long, often bitter, but it transformed the republic. Rome had begun as an aristocracy. Now it was still unequal, but more inclusive, more flexible, and stronger. And that strength was needed, because while the republic restructured itself from within, it was also fighting for its life from without.
The Italian peninsula was no blank canvas. It was home to fierce and ancient peoples. The Etruscans in the north, the Samnites in the hills, the Greeks along the southern coast. To survive and to thrive, Rome had to fight. The early republic fought not one war, but dozens, sometimes simultaneously. Between 509 and 264 BCE, Rome would battle neighbors, former allies, and distant kingdoms in a relentless campaign of conquest and consolidation. The Latin League was first. Rome had once been its number. Now it became its master. Then came the Veii, an Etruscan rival to the north. After years of war, Rome besieged and destroyed the city in 396 BCE, absorbing its territory and people. But the greatest test came not from conquest, but from near annihilation. In 390 BCE, a horde of Gauls from the north swept down and sacked Rome. They burned the city, looted its temples, and left the republic shaken. But Rome did not die. The Senate rebuilt, the people rallied, the walls were strengthened. Rome had tasted destruction and vowed never to be so vulnerable again. Then came the Samnite Wars, a brutal series of 3 conflicts spanning over 50 years. The Samnites were highland warriors, skilled in ambush and terrain warfare. Rome suffered humiliating defeats, like the Battle of the Caudine Forks, where Roman soldiers were forced to march under the yoke, a symbol of submission. But Rome learned, adapted, reformed its legions. Eventually, the Samnites were crushed, their power broken by 290 BCE. Next came the Greek cities of southern Italy, the region called Magna Graecia. Here, Rome faced not just local cities, but a king, Pyrrhus of Epirus, a cousin of Alexander the Great. Pyrrhus brought elephants, phalanxes, and Macedonian tactics to Italian soil. At Heraclea and Asculum, Pyrrhus won, but at great cost. He famously declared, "Another such victory, and I am undone." A Pyrrhic victory, a win so costly it becomes a loss. By 275 BCE, Pyrrhus withdrew. The Greek cities surrendered. Rome now controlled almost the entire Italian peninsula. But conquest brought more than land. It brought allies and responsibilities. Rome didn't simply enslave its neighbors, it built a system of alliances, offering protection and limited citizenship in exchange for soldiers and loyalty. By 264 BCE, Rome had created a federation of Italian states, united by treaties, roads, and military service, a patchwork of identities, Latin, Samnite, Etruscan, Greek, all bound to a single power, Rome. The Republic had changed. It was no longer a city-state. It was a regional power, a military machine, a political laboratory held together by law, compromise, and ambition. The plebeians had won rights. The patricians still held wealth, and both were proud of what they had built. But Rome's greatest tests still lay ahead, because across the sea, in North Africa, another power was rising, Carthage. And the clash between these two giants would shake the ancient world.
The Mediterranean Sea. To the Romans, it was Mare Nostrum, our sea. But in 264 BCE, it belonged to no one. It was a vast, contested world, filled with traders, pirates, soldiers, and empires. And two cities stood above the rest. Rome, the rising power of the Italian mainland, expansive, organized, restless. And Carthage, ancient, wealthy, and mighty. A Phoenician colony turned naval empire. A city of harbors, merchants, and silver mines. These two powers had coexisted until Sicily, the island that lay between them, drew them into the first of three wars that would define the ancient world. The First Punic War, 264 to 241 BCE. It began as a local conflict. A band of mercenaries called the Mamertines seized the Sicilian city of Messana and called for help. Both Rome and Carthage answered. And so began the First Punic War, a struggle for Sicily. 23 years of grinding, brutal combat. At first, Rome was at a disadvantage. Carthage controlled the sea, with a massive fleet and centuries of naval tradition. Rome? Rome had none, no navy, no experience. But Rome did something that it always did. It adapted. Captured Carthaginian ships were studied and copied. The Romans invented the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned naval battles into infantry brawls, where Rome excelled. Naval combat became land combat at sea. Rome won stunning victories at Mylae and Ecnomus, some of the largest sea battles in history. But Carthage was resilient. The war dragged on, until finally Rome won a decisive battle at the Aegates Islands in 241 BCE.
Carthage sued for peace. Rome seized Sicily, its first province outside the Italian mainland. The Roman Republic had become a Mediterranean empire. But the peace was fragile, temporary. In Carthage, a new enemy was rising. A boy who had sworn eternal hatred for Rome at his father's command. His name was Hannibal. The Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BCE. Hannibal Barca was not just a general, he was a storm, a tactical genius forged in battle and fueled by vengeance. In 218 BCE, he launched one of the most daring military campaigns in history. He led 90,000 soldiers, 12,000 cavalry, and dozens of war elephants from Spain, across the Pyrenees, through Gaul, and over the towering Alps in winter. It was madness. It was brilliant. Thousands died along the way, but Hannibal emerged into Italy like a phantom from the mountains, and Rome was unprepared. Over the next several years, Hannibal would bring Rome to its knees. At Trebia, he lured Roman forces into a freezing river ambush. At Lake Trasimene, he orchestrated the largest ambush in ancient warfare, annihilating a Roman army in fog and forest. And then, in 216 BCE, came Cannae, a masterpiece of military art. Hannibal faced nearly 80,000 Roman troops. He was outnumbered, but through brilliant deception and tactical positioning, he encircled the Roman legions and slaughtered them. As many as 50,000 Roman soldiers died in a single day. It was Rome's darkest hour. Many allies abandoned her. Fear swept through the city. But Rome, even in defeat, did not surrender. Instead, it endured. It refused to negotiate. It raised new armies. It waged a war of attrition. Rome sent Publius Cornelius Scipio, the son of a slain general, to Spain. There, he cut off Carthage's reinforcements, winning key victories and undermining Hannibal's supply lines. Scipio then did something bold. He brought the war to Africa. Carthage, now vulnerable, recalled Hannibal from Italy. And in 202 BCE, the two titans met at Zama. Hannibal had elephants. Scipio had strategy. He blunted the elephant charge with noise and gaps in the lines. His cavalry, led by Numidian allies, struck from behind. Hannibal was defeated. Carthage surrendered. The Second Punic War ended. Rome imposed crushing terms. Carthage could no longer wage war without Rome's permission. Its empire in Spain was absorbed, its navy dismantled, its pride broken. But Carthage still existed, and in Rome some could not abide that. The Third Punic War, 149 to 146 BCE. By the mid-2nd century BCE, Rome had become the dominant power in the western Mediterranean. Its legions had fought in Greece, Asia Minor, and beyond, but Carthage, though weakened, was regaining prosperity. And to some Romans, especially Cato the Elder, this was unacceptable. Cato ended every speech, no matter the topic, with the words, Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. In 149 BCE, Rome found a pretext. Carthage had defended itself in a border conflict without Roman approval. It was enough. The Third Punic War was not a campaign. It was an execution. Rome besieged Carthage for 3 years. Carthaginians resisted fiercely, building new weapons, new ships, even forging arms from household metal. They fought street by street, house by house. But in 146 BCE, Rome broke through. The city was burned, its people slaughtered or enslaved, the harbor filled with rubble, the fields salted, perhaps more legend than fact, but powerful nonetheless. Carthage, once queen of the seas, was gone, erased. Aftermath: Rome as a superpower. The destruction of Carthage marked a turning point in Roman history. Rome no longer had rivals. It controlled Spain, Sicily, Corsica, Sardinia, North Africa, and now increasingly the Greek world. The legions had proven invincible. The Republic seemed unstoppable. But victory came with consequences. Wealth flooded into Rome. Silver from Spain, tribute from Asia, slaves from every corner of the world. Senators grew rich. Aristocrats bought up land. A new elite, the noblesse, emerged, fusing old patrician bloodlines with plebeian ambition. But inequality widened. Small farmers, the backbone of Rome, lost their lands. Unemployment in the city grew. The Republic had conquered the world, but it had not prepared to govern it. Meanwhile, the army, once a force of citizen soldiers, now fought for generals, not the Senate. Loyalty shifted from the Republic to ambitious warlords. The seeds of civil war were planted here, not in battle, but in victory. But in 146 BCE, few in Rome were concerned. The Republic had destroyed its greatest enemy. It had claimed the Mediterranean as its own. It had forged an empire, not through design, but through necessity, resilience, and war. From the hills of Latium to the plains of Africa, one truth was now undeniable. Rome was no longer a regional power. Rome was a superpower. But the challenges ahead would not come from abroad. They would rise from within. The next wars Rome would fight would be against itself.
In 1466 BCE, Rome stood victorious. Carthage destroyed, its ruins still smoldering on the African coast. And on the same day, in the east, Corinth, the jewel of Greece, was razed to the ground by Roman legions. Two ancient rivals, both annihilated. Rome had not only conquered, it had made a statement. The world belonged to Rome now. But with victory came new problems, and a deeper crisis was beginning to take shape, not from foreign enemies, but from within the Republic itself. The conquest of the East. With Carthage out of the way, Rome turned its attention to the riches of the East. The Greek world, once ruled by Alexander the Great, had fractured into kingdoms: Macedonia, Pergamon, Seleucia, Ptolemaic Egypt, each weakened by war, politics, and internal decay. Rome entered as a liberator. But in truth, liberation often meant annexation. Macedonia was defeated and turned into a Roman province in 148 BCE. Then Greece followed, first as protectorates, then as colonies, and eventually as fully integrated Roman territories. The Romans admired Greek art, philosophy, and literature. They read Homer, studied Aristotle, and sculpted in marble. But they ruled Greece not with admiration, but with iron. Roman governors extracted taxes. Roman generals looted temples, and Roman merchants flooded the East with Roman currency and contracts. In 133 BCE, the dying king of Pergamon willed his entire kingdom to Rome, not through conquest, but through diplomacy. Suddenly, Rome owned a vast swath of Asia Minor. More land,
more wealth, more power. But the Republic wasn't ready. Rome had become a global empire, but it still ran on institutions designed for a small city-state. And cracks were beginning to show. Corruption and inequality. Victory had brought Rome incredible wealth, but that wealth flowed in one direction, upward. Conquered lands brought gold, silver, and tribute, and vast estates in Italy and beyond were gobbled up by Rome's elite. These estates, called latifundia, were worked not by citizens but by slaves, captured from across the empire. As slavery spread, free Roman farmers, the smallholders who had once formed the backbone of the legions, were pushed off their land, unable to compete. They flooded into the cities, especially Rome, where they found poverty, unemployment, and overcrowded tenements. The old Roman values of virtus, pietas, and discipline began to erode. Greed, bribery, and patronage took their place. Elections were bought, senators grew rich on provincial corruption, and the Senate, once the symbol of Roman wisdom, had become a club for the privileged. Powerful factions emerged, battling not for the people, but for their own ambitions. And into this storm stepped two brothers, idealists, reformers, revolutionaries. The Gracchi brothers. Their name was Gracchus. Born into an aristocratic family, but sympathetic to the plight of the common citizen. The elder brother, Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, was charismatic, intelligent, and deeply disturbed by what he saw. The Republic was rotting from the inside. In 133 BCE, Tiberius was elected tribune of the plebs, a position that gave him the power to propose laws and protect the people. He used it to challenge the Senate directly. His key proposal was the Lex Sempronia Agraria, a land reform bill that would break up the vast latifundia and redistribute land to the poor. The reaction was swift. The elite were furious. Tiberius bypassed the Senate entirely, taking his bill straight to the people. It passed. But the Senate struck back. They cut off funding. They removed Tiberius's allies. And when Tiberius sought re-election, a break from tradition, rumors swirled that he wanted to make himself king. On election day, violence erupted. Senators and their followers stormed the forum with clubs and stones. Tiberius and over 300 of his supporters were beaten to death, their bodies dumped in the Tiber. It was the first political bloodshed in Republican history, the first time violence had replaced debate, and it would not be the last. 10 years later, in 123 BCE, Gaius Gracchus, Tiberius's younger brother, stepped forward. He was more radical, more ambitious, and even more determined to finish what his brother had started. Gaius was elected tribune twice. He passed sweeping reforms, distributing grain to the poor at subsidized prices, a precursor to the Roman welfare state, establishing colonies for poor citizens overseas, proposing that equestrians, the wealthy merchant class, oversee tax collection and corruption trials in the provinces, stripping those powers from the Senate. It was a direct assault on the Senate's control, and Gaius knew it. But while he had popular support, his enemies were growing. When he sought a third term, opposition turned deadly. A mob clashed with his supporters on the Aventine Hill. The Senate declared a Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the first final decree, giving consuls emergency powers to protect the state. Gaius fled. He died by suicide before he could be captured. Over 3,000 of his supporters were executed without trial. The message was clear. Reform could no longer come through peaceful means. The Republic fractures. The Gracchi brothers had exposed a fatal flaw in the Republic. There were no tools for meaningful reform, no mechanisms for correcting inequality, no willingness in the Senate to share power. And when reform met resistance, The only response left was violence. Rome had begun a slow slide towards civil war. From this moment on, politics became blood sport. Street violence, assassinations, military intimidation. The rule of law began to break down. Two political factions emerged. The optimates, the conservative aristocrats defending the Senate and traditional power structures. The populares, those who claimed to represent the people, often appealing directly to the masses and bypassing the Senate. This was no longer the Roman Republic of Cincinnatus and civic virtue. It was becoming a battlefield of ambition. And in the years to come, generals, not senators, would take control. Men like Gaius Marius, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, and eventually Julius Caesar. But it all began here, with a vast empire Rome couldn't manage, with wealth that poisoned its politics, with a Senate more interested in tradition than in justice, and with two brothers who tried to fix it and paid with their lives. The Roman Republic had conquered the world, but in doing so, it had begun to destroy itself.
By 100 BCE, the Roman Republic was more powerful than ever, but also more fragile. Rome had expanded from Spain to Syria, from Gaul to Greece. Its legions marched across continents, its coffers overflowed with gold, but its politics were in chaos. Reform had failed, violence had replaced dialogue, and into this unstable world stepped a new kind of Roman leader. Not the senator, not the tribune, but the general. Marius and the military revolution. It began with Gaius Marius. Born outside the Roman aristocracy, Marius was a self-made man, a brilliant soldier, a ruthless politician, and in 107 BCE elected consul, the first of 7 times. Faced with a crisis in North Africa, Marius did something revolutionary. He reformed the Roman military. Before Marius, the army was composed of land-owning citizens, farmers who returned to their fields after war. But now, Rome needed professional soldiers. Marius opened the ranks to the landless poor, offering them weapons, wages, and land upon retirement. They didn't fight for the Republic, they fought for him. And with this, the foundation of the Republic cracked. Loyalty shifted from state to general. Marius defeated the Numidians, then crushed invading Germanic tribes at Aquisextia and Vercelli. He was hailed as the savior of Rome, but his power terrified the Senate. Marius had opened the door to military populism, and that door would never close. Sulla, march on Rome. Enter Lucius Cornelius Sulla, an aristocrat, rival of Marius, and ambitious in his own right. In 88 BCE, Rome faced a rebellion in the east. The Senate named Sulla to lead the campaign. But the people, under Marius, overturned the decision. Sulla was ordered to step down. Instead, he did the unthinkable. He marched on Rome with his army. It was the first time Roman soldiers had turned their swords on the city they once swore to protect. Sulla took control, executed his enemies, and left to fight in the east. But while he was gone, Marius returned. He retook the city in a bloodbath, executing opponents, seizing power. When Sulla returned, he marched on Rome again. This time, he made it permanent. He declared himself dictator, not for 6 months, as tradition allowed, but for as long as necessary. He published proscription lists, official death warrants. Thousands were killed, their property confiscated. Then Sulla restructured the government to restore senatorial power. And then, astonishingly, he retired. He died in 78 BCE, a man who had seized absolute power
and walked away. But the damage was done. The Republic was no longer ruled by law. It was ruled by force. Spartacus, the slave who defied Rome. While senators plotted and generals schemed, a new rebellion rose, not from the aristocracy, but from the lowest class of all, slaves. In 73 BCE, a gladiator named Spartacus led a breakout from a training school in Capua. What began as a small escape became a full-scale revolt. Tens of thousands of slaves joined him. They formed an army, defeated Roman legions, and marched up and down the Italian peninsula for 2 years. Rome was humiliated. Its legions, unprepared for a slave army, were repeatedly beaten. The rebellion wasn't just military, it was symbolic. It exposed the dependence of Rome's economy on slavery and the vulnerability of a system built on cruelty. Finally, the Senate turned to Marcus Licinius Crassus, a brutal commander who restored discipline with mass executions and terror. Spartacus was defeated in 71 BCE. 6,000 of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way, lining the road from Capua to Rome, a warning to all who would rise. But the fear remained. Rome was no longer invincible, and inside its borders, rebellion brewed. Caesar, rise of a titan. Amid this turmoil, a new figure emerged. Ambitious, cunning, charismatic. Gaius Julius Caesar. Born into a patrician family but aligned with the populares, the people's faction. He was handsome, well-spoken, and deeply dangerous. Caesar climbed the political ladder with bribes, alliances, and dazzling oratory. He formed an unofficial power bloc in 60 BCE, known as the First Triumvirate, with Crassus, the richest man in Rome, and Pompey, its greatest general. Caesar took command in Gaul, and it was there, far from Rome, that his legend was forged. Over the next 8 years, Caesar led one of the most successful military campaigns in Roman history. He conquered the Gallic tribes, defeated Germanic invaders, crossed the Rhine on a temporary bridge, just to show it could be done. He even invaded Britain. The spoils made him wealthy. The victories made him loved. His legions worshipped him. The people adored him. But the Senate grew afraid. They ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. Instead, in 49 BCE, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River, the boundary he was forbidden to cross under arms. He declared war on the Republic. With 1 legion, he marched on Rome. Pompey fled to Greece. Caesar pursued. The civil war had begun. Dictator for life. Caesar hunted Pompey across the Mediterranean. He defeated him at Pharsalus in 42 BCE. Pompey fled to Egypt and was murdered upon arrival. Caesar arrived shortly after, only to be drawn into Egyptian politics and an affair with Queen Cleopatra. He helped her win a civil war of her own. Their alliance and romance would echo through history. Back in Rome, Caesar crushed the remnants for resistance. In 46 BCE, he declared himself dictator, then extended it for 10 years, then for life. He reformed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar, basis of the one we use today. He expanded citizenship, restructured debts, and limited the power of the Senate. But while the people loved him, many senators saw a tyrant. He wore purple, sat on a golden chair, accepted honors reserved for kings. Rome had overthrown its monarchy centuries before, and now it seemed a new king had arrived. The Ides of March.
On March 15, 44 BCE, Caesar entered the Senate. He was surrounded. Led by Brutus, Cassius, and other conspirators, the senators struck. Caesar was stabbed 23 times at the foot of a statue of Pompey, his old rival. According to legend, he saw Brutus and whispered, "Et tu, Brute?" Then fell. The assassins believed they had saved the Republic. They were wrong. The Republic collapsed. Caesar's death plunged Rome into chaos again. Instead of restoring liberty, his murder sparked another civil war. His supporters, Mark Antony, Lepidus, and Caesar's heir, Gaius Augustus, later known as Augustus, would turn against his killers, and then against each other. The Republic had collapsed under its own ambition, betrayal, and war. What began with Marius and Sulla, generals fighting over policy, had ended with Caesar, a general becoming policy. From this point forward, Rome would never again be ruled by a Senate. The idea of the Republic was dead. But in the ashes of that idea, a new one would rise, an empire, and the man to lead it was waiting in the wings.
The Ides of March, 44 BCE, the Senate House of Pompey. A blade flashes, then another, then 20 more. And with one final gasp, the most powerful man in Rome, Gaius Julius Caesar, falls to the marble floor. His blood soaks the base of Pompey's statue, the irony complete. The assassins step away breathless. Brutus, Cassius, senators, patriots, murderers. They believe the Republic has been saved, but they had misjudged Rome. They killed Caesar, but not Caesarism. The power vacuum. In the immediate aftermath, Rome holds its breath. The assassins call for liberty, freedom from tyranny, but the people do not cheer. They mourn. Julius Caesar had given them food, land, entertainment. He had won wars and forgave his enemies. He was not a tyrant to them. The killers have no plan, no army, no answer for what comes next. Into the void steps a young man from the countryside, thin, sickly, just 18 years old. Gaius Octavius, Caesar's adopted son and heir. In his will, Caesar names him his son in name and estate. Overnight, Octavian becomes the most talked about man in Rome. He takes his uncle's name, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, but history will remember him simply as Augustus. The rise of Octavian. No one expects much of him. The Senate sees a boy easily manipulated. Mark Antony, Caesar's top general, sees a rival to crush. But Octavian is no ordinary teenager. He is calculating, cold, and patient. He raises money, builds an army, and begins playing the political game with deadly precision. Antony tries to sideline him, but the Senate, desperate to eliminate Caesar's killers, sees opportunity. Octavian is declared a consul at just 19 years old, an unprecedented move. Then, in a move of pure political genius, Octavian joins forces with his enemies. He allies with Antony and Lepidus to form the Second Triumvirate in 43 BCE. This is no loose arrangement. It is formal, legal, and terrifying. Together they begin proscriptions, death lists. Enemies of the triumvirate are hunted down, their wealth seized. Cicero, the famed orator and enemy of Antony, is captured and executed, his head and hands nailed to the speaker's podium in the Forum.
Rome is drenched in blood again, but the Republic, already dead in all but name. The road to Philippi. With the city secured, the triumvirs turned their attention east. Brutus and Cassius, Caesar's killers, have raised armies in Greece. The climactic battle takes place at Philippi in 42 BCE. Antony leads the charge. Octavian falls ill, but his troops fight bravely. The result is decisive. Brutus and Cassius are defeated. Both commit suicide rather than face capture. The assassins are gone, but so too now is any illusion that the Republic will return. Only one question remains: who will rule Rome now? Cracks in the triumvirate. With their common enemies destroyed, the alliance frays. Lepidus is sidelined, stripped of power and exiled. That leaves two men, Octavian in the west and Mark Antony in the east. And between them, the world. At first, they pretend cooperation, but tensions grow. Antony begins a political and romantic alliance with Cleopatra VII, Queen of Egypt. Their relationship scandalizes Rome. She is a foreign queen. He is a Roman general. Worse, Antony divorces Octavia, Octavian's sister. The insult is personal, unforgivable. When Antony declares Caesarion, Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar, as his rightful heir, Octavian strikes. He launches a propaganda war. He portrays Antony as a traitor to Rome, a man bewitched by an Eastern seductress, a puppet of Egypt. He responds by declaring Octavian illegitimate. War becomes inevitable. Prelude to Actium. The final confrontation is set. It will not be a synod debate, not a courtroom trial. It will be a naval battle. In 31 BCE, the fleets of Octavian and Antony meet off the coast of Greece, near a place called Actium. Octavian's forces, led by the brilliant Admiral Agrippa, entrap Antony and Cleopatra's fleet in the Gulf. What follows is not a grand clash of empires, but a slow, strategic strangling. Antony attempts a breakout. Cleopatra sails first. Antony follows her, abandoning most of his fleet. His forces collapse. Victory belongs to Octavian. The end of Antony and Cleopatra. Antony and Cleopatra flee to Egypt. Their position is hopeless. In 30 BCE, Octavian invades Egypt. He marches into Alexandria without resistance. Cornered, Antony falls on his sword. Cleopatra, refusing to be paraded through Rome as a captive, takes her own life. Legend says she uses an asp, a venomous snake. Perhaps it was poison. Regardless, with their deaths, 400 years of Ptolemaic rule in Egypt ends, and with it, the last resistance to Roman supremacy. Egypt becomes a Roman province, and Octavian now controls all Roman territory. There are no rivals, no challengers, just one man and the ashes of a republic. Octavian's rise. Octavian returns to Rome in triumph. He doesn't declare himself king. Rome still fears monarchy. Instead, he uses subtlety. He claims to restore the republic. He takes the title princeps, meaning first citizen. He's granted the name Augustus, meaning the revered one. The Senate, exhausted from war, gives him powers without limit. He controls the legions, the provinces, the treasury. But he doesn't appear as a dictator. He governs behind a mask of republican tradition. And the people rejoice. For after a century of civil wars, Rome has peace. The republic ends and the empire begins. In 27 BCE, Octavian officially renounces his extraordinary powers. The Senate begs him to stay. He agrees, and in that moment, the Republic becomes the Roman Empire. The transformation is legal, elegant, almost invisible, but real. Rome is no longer a republic of elected officials. It is an empire ruled by one man. An empire in all but name. Octavian becomes Augustus, the first Roman emperor. A new era. Augustus will rule for over 40 years. He will usher in the Pax Romana, a golden age of Roman peace and prosperity. But that is another chapter. For now, one age has ended. The Senate is a shadow. The Republic is a memory. And Rome, forged in blood and ambition, now stands as the greatest empire the world has ever known.
27 BCE. The civil wars are over. The Republic is dead, but Rome does not mourn. Instead, it cheers. Into the Senate House walks Gaius Octavius, adopted son of Julius Caesar, a man who has outlasted Brutus, Cassius, Antony, and Cleopatra, a man who holds absolute power, yet offers it back. The Senate refuses. They beg him to stay in command, to save the state from further chaos. He agrees, modestly. And so the young victor becomes Augustus, meaning the revered one. No crown, no throne, no title of king. But make no mistake, Rome now has an emperor. First emperor, reforms and propaganda. Augustus is no Caesar. Where Caesar was bold and brash, Augustus is careful and calculating. He knows Rome fears tyranny, and so he disguises his rule in tradition. He takes on humble titles: princeps, first citizen; imperator, commander; pontifex maximus, chief priest. But beneath this modest veneer lies total control. He holds consular power, tribunician power, and control over the provinces and the armies. He has the right to propose laws, veto legislation, and control the treasury. He is the state, veiled in republican robes. To ensure the system endures, he begins a vast program of reform. First, the administration. He reorganizes the Senate, shrinking it from 1,000 to 600 men, restoring prestige to a bloated institution. He creates a professional bureaucracy, loyal to him, not elected by the people. Next, the military. He establishes a standing army, 28 legions, each with a permanent post. He introduces fixed salaries and land pensions, ensuring soldiers fight for Rome, not for rogue generals. Then, society. He launches moral legislation, encouraging marriage and childbirth, penalizing adultery and bachelorhood. He portrays himself as the guardian of Roman values, restorer of tradition. And perhaps most significantly, he wields the power of propaganda. He commissions poets like Virgil and Horace to glorify his rule. In the Aeneid, Virgil writes a mythic origin story for Rome, tracing Augustus's lineage back to Aeneas, son of Venus. Augustus becomes not just a ruler, but a divinely ordained savior.
He fills Rome with marble monuments, temples, forums, triumphal arches. "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble," he would later say. Through art, architecture, and poetry, Augustus builds not just a government, but a narrative. The Pax Romana begins. And so begins the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. A golden age born from iron and blood. A time when the empire stretches from the Atlantic to the Euphrates, from the Rhine to the Nile. A world of roads, aqueducts, trade routes, and law. The legions are no longer marching in civil war. They are stationed across the provinces, protecting borders, building forts, training locals. In Spain, North Africa, Judea, and Gaul, Roman law is imposed, citizenship expanded, infrastructure built. Provinces become Romanized, adopting Latin, Roman dress, Roman gods. Trade flourishes. Silks from China, spices from India, glass from Syria, gold from Africa. The Mediterranean becomes a Roman lake, Mare Nostrum, our sea. The roads Augustus builds, Viae Militariae, carry legions and merchants, messages and taxes. A courier could travel over 150 miles per day on Rome's network. The grain supply is stabilized. The coinage system is standardized. Taxes are streamlined. Corruption is curbed. Famine and instability, once frequent, are now rare. For the first time in centuries, a Roman child can grow up without hearing the sound of civil war. Augustus the Father. To the Roman people, Augustus becomes not just a leader, but a father figure. He takes the title Pater Patriae, Father of the Fatherland. He appears on coins, statues, and frescoes as an eternal, idealized figure. He does not age. His image is frozen in marble perfection. But behind the imagery lies a deeper reality. Augustus is consolidating power with surgical precision. He does not tolerate dissent. When poets like Ovid cross the line, they are exiled. When generals become too popular, they are reassigned, retired, or removed. Even within his family, Augustus enforces strict discipline. His daughter, Julia, is exiled for violating his moral laws. His grandchildren are married off, divorced, or adopted, all in service of dynastic control. He knows the biggest threat to stability is not invasion, but succession. Augustus tries repeatedly to groom an heir, but tragedy intervenes. His nephew Marcellus dies young. His stepsons Lucas and Gaius Caesar also die prematurely. At last he turns to his stepson, Tiberius, a brooding, reluctant general, but capable and loyal. In 4 CE, Augustus formally adopts him. The line of succession is set. Augustus in the east. Even beyond Rome, Augustus shapes the world. In Judea, he allows the client king Herod the Great to reign, so long as he remains loyal. In Egypt, he rules as Pharaoh, worshipped as a god. In the east, temples to the divine Augustus begin to appear during his lifetime. In 20 BCE, he secures the return of the Parthian eagles, symbols lost in a humiliating defeat decades earlier. He presents this not as a diplomatic negotiation, but a moral victory, proof of Rome's divine destiny. Trouble on the frontier. Yet, not all is peace. In the north, Germanic tribes remain defiant. Augustus sends his trusted general Varus to pacify the region beyond the Rhine. But in 9 CE, in the Teutoburg forest, disaster strikes. 3 Roman legions are ambushed by Germanic warriors led by Arminius, a Roman-trained tribal chieftain. The result is catastrophic. Over 15,000 Roman soldiers are slaughtered, their standards lost, their skulls nailed to trees. Rome is stunned. Augustus is devastated. "Varus, give me back my legions," he reportedly cries, pounding his head against a wall. The defeat ends Rome's expansion into Germania. The Rhine becomes the northern frontier.
Even in peace, the empire has limits. The death of Augustus. In 14 CE, after more than 40 decades in power, Augustus falls ill. He retreats to Nola, where his father had died. Surrounded by loyal friends and family, he whispers final words. Have I played my part well in this comedy of life? If so, applaud. And then, quietly, Rome's first emperor dies. He is deified by the Senate. Temples are built in his honor. Priests appointed to maintain his cult. And the world turns to his successor, Tiberius, son and name, heir by necessity. Legacy of Augustus. Augustus ruled longer than any man in Roman history before him. He ended a century of civil war, transformed a crumbling republic into a powerful empire, and laid the foundation for 200 years of relative peace. He redefined what it meant to be Roman, what it meant to rule, what it meant to be eternal. His fingerprints were on every road, every law, every coin, and his shadow would stretch over every emperor to come. For the next 4 centuries, Rome would rise and fall, rebuild and break, but the model was Augustus.
14 CE. The eternal city holds its breath. The first emperor, Augustus, is dead. After more than 40 years of control, his quiet departure leaves Rome uncertain. He had promised a new age of peace, order, and stability. Now the question is, can anyone truly replace him? Into this void steps his adopted son and reluctant heir, Tiberius. Tiberius, the reluctant emperor. Tiberius Claudius Nero, son of Livia, stepson of Augustus, a decorated general, a brooding statesman. But power to Tiberius is a burden, not a gift. He inherits an empire that runs like a machine, and for the first years he governs wisely, if coldly. He strengthens the treasury. He avoids reckless wars. He consolidates borders rather than expand them. But Tiberius is not loved. He is aloof, paranoid, and rarely seen in public. He soon retreats from Rome altogether, choosing to rule from the island of Capri. There, cut off from the Senate and the people, his rule turns dark. In his absence, Rome falls under the control of his sinister advisor, Lucius Aelius Sejanus, commander of the Praetorian Guard. Sejanus eliminates rivals. He purges the Senate. He consolidates power for himself, one accusation at a time, until Tiberius, finally awakened, orders his execution in a letter read aloud in the Senate. Sejanus is arrested, dragged through the streets, and strangled. Tiberius, now fully paranoid, rules with terror. Executions rise. Treason trials become common. By the time he dies in 37 CE, Rome breathes a sigh of relief. He leaves no natural heir, only the son of his nephew, a young man named Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, known to the world as Caligula. Caligula, the mad emperor. At first, the people rejoice. Caligula is the son of the beloved general Germanicus. He is young, charismatic, and energetic. For 6 months, all goes well. He grants bonuses to the army. He frees political prisoners. He abolishes unjust taxes. And then, everything changes. A mysterious illness strikes Caligula in late 37 CE. He survives, but the man who recovers is not the man Rome once cheered. What follows is one of the most infamous reigns in Roman history. Caligula declares himself a living god. He builds temples in his honor, forces senators to worship him, demands to be addressed as Jupiter. He appoints his horse Incitatus as a priest and threatens to make him a consul. He drains the treasury on games, parties, and palaces.
He stages elaborate gladiatorial spectacles, sometimes with innocent citizens as the victims. Worse still, he lashes out in paranoia. Those who oppose him or even joke are executed. Even his own family is not safe. By 41 CE, the Senate and Praetorian Guard have had enough. A plot is formed. One day, as Caligula walks through a palace corridor, he is surrounded. He is stabbed 30 times. His reign lasts just 4 years, but it leaves a mark on Roman memory that will last centuries. The emperor is dead. Rome is again without a leader, until a voice cries out, "The emperor lives!" Behind a curtain, cowering in fear, is Caligula's uncle, Claudius. Claudius, the scholar king. Claudius, born with a limp and a stammer, was long dismissed as a fool, mocked by his family, hidden from public life. But now, unexpectedly, the empire is his. And to the shock of all, Claudius proves to be one of Rome's most capable rulers. He cleans up the corruption of Caligula's court. He expands the empire, most notably launching the invasion of Britannia in 43 CE. It is a stunning success. Roman legions cross the Channel and begin the long, bloody conquest of the island. A triumph is held in Claudius's honor. He also undertakes massive public works, new aqueducts, roads, and a deep-water port at Ostia. He strengthens the bureaucracy, allowing freedmen to rise to positions of power, a controversial move, but an effective one. Yet Claudius has one weakness: his wives. He marries several times. His most notorious wife is Agrippina the Younger, his niece. She has ambition, cunning, and a son from a previous marriage, a boy named Lucius Domitius Aninobars, better known to history as Nero. Claudius adopts Nero and names him his heir, bypassing his own son, Britannicus. In 54 CE, Claudius dies, allegedly poisoned by Agrippina herself, though the truth remains unknown. Nero ascends the throne at just 16. Nero, the artist emperor. At first, the reign of Nero is surprisingly promising. Under the guidance of his tutor, the philosopher Seneca, and the general Burrus, Nero governs wisely. He reduces taxes, bans capital punishment, supports the arts. But like Caligula before him, the promise does not last. Power and paranoia begin to consume him. In 59 CE, Nero orders the murder of his own mother, Agrippina, once his strongest supporter. When the first assassination attempt fails, he orders soldiers to finish the job, stabbing her to death in her villa. Seneca retreats from public life. Burrus dies, perhaps poisoned. Now alone, Nero indulges his passions. He sees himself not as an emperor, but an artist. He sings, writes poetry, acts in public. He performs in Greek theaters, scandalous behavior for a Roman emperor. In 64 CE, disaster strikes. The Great Fire of Rome rages for 9 days. 10 of the city's 14 districts are destroyed. Nero is not in the city when it begins, but rumors spread that he played the lyre while Rome burned. Seeking a scapegoat, Nero blames a new religious sect, followers of a crucified Jewish man called Christus. Christians are arrested, tortured, and executed. Some are burned alive, others fed to wild animals in the arena. Nero's popularity plummets. He raises taxes to build his Domus Aurea, a massive golden palace built on the ruins of the fire. He bankrupts the treasury. He executes senators on suspicion alone. Even his own wife, Poppaea, dies, allegedly kicked to death by Nero in a rage. Rebellion brews in the provinces. In 68 CE, the governor of Gaul, Julius Vindex, rises in revolt. Others soon follow. The Senate declares Nero a public enemy. Alone, abandoned, Nero flees the city. In a villa outside Rome, he takes his own life. His last words, "What an artist dies in me." With Nero's death, the Julio-Claudian dynasty ends. The bloodline of Augustus, born in glory, ends in madness. The first dynasty ends in chaos. Over the course of 5 emperors, Rome has seen the best and worst of autocracy. Augustus built an empire. Tiberius ruled from the shadows. Caligula terrorized. Claudius reformed. And Nero destroyed. The family that began as guardians of peace left behind chaos, corruption, and blood. The year is 68 CE. Rome is again without a leader, and the empire now plunges into what will become the year of the 4 emperors.
69 CE. The Roman Empire stands on a knife's edge. Nero is gone. The Julio-Claudian line is extinguished. And into the void, chaos. 1 year, 4 emperors. First, Galba, stern, elderly, austere. He promises discipline, but delivers only arrogance. His own guard turns against him, assassinated in the Forum, his head displayed on a pike. Then Otho, a conspirator, a man of ambition and style. But barely 3 months into his reign, the legions of the Rhine march under another name, Vitellius. Otho takes his own life in honor to avoid civil war. Rome weeps. Vitellius takes power, gluttonous, cruel, incompetent. His reign collapses in a tide of violence. And in the east, a new force emerges, Vespasian. A general, a builder, a survivor. Commander of Roman forces in Judea. With the legions at his back, he marches on Rome. Vitellius is dragged through the streets, murdered. And so begins a new dynasty, a dynasty of strength, a dynasty of emperors made, not born, the Flavians. Vespasian brings order. The economy stabilizes. The legions are disciplined. He taxes the public toilets and shrugs at the complaints. Money doesn't stink, he says. But most famously, he commissions a gift to the Roman people. An amphitheater where Nero's palace once stood, the Colosseum. An arena for 50,000 citizens, gladiators, beasts, battles, spectacle. Bread and circuses. Control through grandeur. In 79 CE, Vespasian dies peacefully, a rarity in Rome. His son, Titus, takes the throne. Titus is a hero of war, the general who crushed the Jewish revolt. He destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, raised the Arch of Titus to commemorate Rome's might. But as emperor, he reveals a gentler side. And then disaster strikes. Mount Vesuvius erupts. Pompeii and Herculaneum vanish beneath fire and ash. Thousands perish. Titus leads relief efforts. He opens the imperial treasury. Rome praises him as compassionate, noble, just. 2 years later, a fire and plague sweep through the capital. Still, Titus remains beloved. And then, suddenly, he dies. Some whisper of poison, others of fate. He ruled only 2 years.
His brother, Domitian, succeeds him. Paranoid, intelligent, ambitious. He declares himself Lord and God, demands total obedience. He tightens the borders, strengthens the currency, and wages war in Dacia. But his tyranny grows. The Senate fears him. Even the palace fears him. And in 96 CE, he is murdered in his chambers, stabbed by those closest to him. The Flavian dynasty ends in blood. But from that darkness, light. The Senate appoints Nerva, old, wise, unassuming. But his greatest act is this: he chooses a successor, a man of strength, a soldier, a Spaniard, Trajan. And so begins a golden age, the era of the 5 good emperors. Trajan is the conqueror. Under his command, Rome expands farther than ever before. He defeats the Dacians, crushes their king Decebalus, brings back gold and glory. To mark the triumph, he builds Trajan's Column, a marble scroll of military genius carved in stone. And then to the east, Armenia, Mesopotamia, even the Parthian capital falls. Trajan rules an empire from the edge of the Sahara to the banks of the Tigris, from the forests of Germania to the sands of Arabia. This is the peak. 5 million square kilometers, 70 million people, 1 emperor, 1 Rome. When Trajan dies in 117 CE, his successor is already chosen. Hadrian, a thinker, a traveler, a builder. Where Trajan expanded, Hadrian retreats. He abandons overreached territories. He consolidates, fortifies, secures. He builds Hadrian's Wall in Britannia, a stone line between civilization and chaos. He tours the empire, Greece, Egypt, Gaul, Asia Minor. He inspects every province, every city. He builds the Pantheon, a dome to the heavens, and he mourns the death of his companion, Antinous, deifying him across the empire. Hadrian rules with a philosopher's mind and an emperor's will. He dies in 138 CE. His heir, Antoninus Pius. Antoninus Pius brings peace. No major wars, no revolts, no executions. The empire prospers. The Senate loves him. The provinces adore him. He reforms the law, builds temples and roads. His reign is the calm before the storm. And when he dies, he leaves behind a legacy and 2 heirs. One, the son of a noble family. The other, a soldier. Only one would survive. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king. He rules with wisdom, but fate gives him only war. The Antonine Plague decimates the population. Germanic tribes cross the Danube. He writes his thoughts in a Leva journal, under torchlight, beneath his tent. He calls it Meditations. He writes, "Accept everything that comes to you, woven in the pattern of your destiny. For what could more aptly fit your needs?" He fights the Marcomannic Wars. He upholds justice. He sacrifices peace for the sake of Rome. In 180 CE, he dies on campaign. One of the few emperors to rule, write, and die with honor. But then, his son takes the throne, Commodus. The age of the good emperors ends not with war,
but with a fool in a lion's skin, gladiator's sword in hand, declaring himself Hercules reborn. The golden age is over. Rome now turns toward decadence, cruelty, and civil war. And the storm is just beginning.
180 CE. On the cold banks of the Danube, beneath a leaden sky, Emperor Marcus Aurelius dies. A soldier, a stoic, a philosopher king. He ruled not for power, but for principle. His reign brought wisdom, but also war and plague. He bore his burdens without complaint and led the empire through one of its darkest hours. His final act? Naming his son as successor. And with that, the Roman Empire would begin to crack. His son was Commodus. Commodus enters history not as a statesman, but as a showman. He rejects the careful, virtuous model of his father and embraces indulgence, vanity, and violence. Where Marcus wrote philosophy, Commodus carved his name into the bones of Rome. He dresses as Hercules, performs in the arena, and charges the treasury for each victory he stages. He believes himself a god. He slaughters senators, elevates sycophants, and surrounds himself with flatterers. He renames the months after himself. Rome becomes Colonia Commodiana. His face appears on statues, temples, and coins, all carved in lion skins and wielding clubs. But behind the theater lies ruin. The economy falters. The army is neglected. The Senate is humiliated. Conspiracies rise. The people starve. In 192 CE, on New Year's Eve, Commodus is murdered, strangled in his bath by a wrestler, at the command of his own inner circle. Rome breathes a sigh of relief. But what comes next is even more dangerous. The year of 5 emperors begins in chaos. The Senate selects a reformer, Pertinax, to stabilize the state. He restores discipline, slashes extravagance, and tries to bring order. But his reign lasts just 87 days. The Praetorian Guard, enraged by lost privileges, kills him in the palace. Then they do the unthinkable. They auction off the throne. A wealthy senator, Didius Julianus, purchases it, offering the guard 25,000 sesterces per man. The Roman Empire is sold to the highest bidder. But the legions on the frontiers do not accept this insult. 3 generals rise: Pasinius Niger in Syria, Clodius Albinus in Britain, and Septimius Severus on the Danube frontier. Severus acts swiftly. He marches on Rome, executes Julianus, and takes the throne by force. Severus becomes emperor not by law, but by sword. He disbands the disloyal Praetorian Guard and replaces them with his own men. He rewards the army lavishly, raising pay and allowing soldiers to marry. Severus understands one truth: the army now rules Rome. He wages successful campaigns in Parthia, taking Ctesiphon, and expands Roman holdings in the east. He campaigns in Africa and builds monuments to victory. In Britain, he personally leads campaigns into Caledonia, modern Scotland. But behind the battlefield triumphs lies a transformed empire. The Senate is ignored. Civil service becomes militarized. Power is increasingly centralized in the person of the emperor. When Severus dies in 211 CE, he leaves the empire to his sons, Caracalla and Geta. The co-emperors do not last. Caracalla murders Geta in their mother's arms and orders a damnatio memoriae, erasing his brother's name from all inscriptions and monuments. To secure the army's loyalty, Caracalla doubles their pay, bankrupting the treasury. To increase tax revenues, he issues the Edict of Caracalla in 212 CE, granting citizenship to all free men in the empire. It sounds noble, but the motive is economic. Caracalla dreams of conquest. He campaigns in Germania, then marches east to imitate Alexander the Great. But in 217 CE, while urinating along the roadside, Caracalla is stabbed to death by one of his own soldiers. Macrinus, a non-aristocrat and bureaucrat, becomes emperor, Rome's first equestrian ruler. But the army mistrusts him. In 218 CE, a teenage priest from Syria claims the throne, backed by Severan loyalists. He brings with him a new god, the sun deity Elegabal. His reign is one of scandal. He elevates his god above Jupiter, parades through Rome in silk robes, and ignores traditional Roman customs. The people are shocked. Even his family turns against him. In 222 CE, the Praetorian Guard slaughters Elegabal and his mother. His cousin, Severus Alexander, just 13, is named emperor. Severus Alexander rules in uneasy peace. He tries to reform the economy and reduce corruption, but his youth and reliance on his mother undermine his authority. The world around Rome continues to grow more dangerous. On the eastern frontier, the Parthians fall, but a new, more powerful Persian empire rises, the Sassanids. In the north, Germanic tribes press against the Rhine and Danube. Rome's borders are under siege. In 235 CE, Alexander's attempt to negotiate with invading tribes enrages his soldiers. He is murdered by his own troops. His death ends the Severan dynasty, and with it, imperial stability dies. The 3rd century crisis begins. From 235 to 284 CE, Rome descends into a half-century of disaster. Emperors rise and fall with terrifying speed, often dying after just months in power. Civil wars erupt in every region. The economy collapses under inflation, plague, and debasement of coinage. Invasions multiply. In 260 CE, Emperor Valerian is captured alive by the Persian king Shapur I, humiliated and never seen again. That same year, the empire splits. In the west, Gaul, Hispania, and Britain form the Gallic Empire. In the east, Queen Zenobia of Palmyra conquers Egypt and Syria, ruling independently from Rome. The Roman world fractures. But amid the chaos, a few emperors shine. Gallienus, son of Valerian, reforms the cavalry and strengthens the Danube frontier. Aurelian, known as Restitutor Orbis, restorer of the world, reunites the empire by defeating both Zenobia and the Gallic rebels. He builds the Aurelian walls around Rome, defending the capital for the first time in centuries. But, like so many others, he is assassinated by his own officers. The empire limps forward, held together by willpower, not stability. The frontier is a battlefield. The throne is a death sentence. The glory of Rome has faded, but its name still holds power. By 284 CE, the empire teeters on the edge. A soldier from Illyria named Diocletian rises from obscurity. He seizes the throne with steel and strategy. He will become Diocletian, and he will reshape the empire in ways no one has dared before.
235 CE. The Rhine frontier is cold and tense. The legions, discontent and impatient, turn on their emperor, Severus Alexander. He had tried diplomacy. The army wanted war. In a military camp near Mainz, he is assassinated along with his mother. With his death, the Severan dynasty ends, and Rome slides into chaos. This is the beginning of the 3rd century crisis.
a time of relentless upheaval. For nearly 50 years, emperors come and go, often rising from the army and falling by the sword. They are the barracks emperors, soldiers elevated by their troops, not the Senate. Men of ambition and violence, rarely lasting more than a few months or years. Between 235 and 284 CE, over 20 emperors will rule in rapid succession. Almost all will die violently. The empire itself begins to unravel. Rome's once vast wealth is drained by endless wars and internal instability. Frontiers collapse under the weight of barbarian invasions. The currency is debased, silver coins diluted with copper, leading to rampant inflation. Trade withers, cities shrink. The Antoninian plague of the previous century is followed by the plague of Cyprian, devastating urban populations and the army alike. Crops fail, famines spread. The imperial machine groans under its own weight. And the enemies are closing in. Along the Rhine and Danube, Germanic tribes press hard, the Alemanni, the Franks, the Goths. In the east, a new Persian dynasty rises, the Sassanids, far more aggressive than the Parthians they replaced. In 260 CE, Emperor Valerian, attempting to hold back the Persian king Shapur I, is captured in battle near Edessa. A Roman emperor, taken alive. The humiliation is total. Some accounts claim he is used as a footstool, others that his body is flayed and stuffed. Whatever the truth, Rome has never suffered such disgrace. Meanwhile, at home, the empire fractures. Authority in Rome means little in the provinces. In Gaul, the western provinces break away to form the Gallic Empire, led by the general Postumus. In the east, a powerful city-state rises, Palmyra, under the rule of Queen Zenobia. She captures Syria, Egypt, and parts of Asia Minor. Her court blends Roman and Eastern traditions, and she claims descent from Cleopatra. For a time, the Roman Empire exists in three pieces: the central core in Italy, the Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east. A civilization forged in unity is now split by ambition, and yet, from this storm emerges an emperor unlike the others. Lucius Domitius Aurelianus, known to history as Aurelian. A peasant by birth, a soldier by trade, a general hardened on the frontiers. In 270 CE, he is proclaimed emperor by the army. And this time, Rome has a leader not just with strength, but with vision. Aurelian moves quickly. First, he crushes the Gothic tribes and secures the Danube frontier. To protect the heart of the empire, he begins construction of a massive new defensive wall around the city of Rome itself, the Aurelian Walls, which still stand today. Then, he turns east. Zenobia of Palmyra has created a powerful state, backed by elite cavalry and immense wealth. But Aurelian will not tolerate disunion. He marches into the east, defeating her forces at Emai and Emesa. Zenobia flees, but is captured near the Euphrates River. Palmyra surrenders. Aurelian marches back to Rome in triumph, Zenobia paraded in golden chains. But his work is not done. In the west, the Gallic Empire still stands. Aurelian crosses the Alps and faces the forces of Tetricus I, the Gallic Emperor. At the Battle of Chalons in 274 CE, Aurelian wins a decisive victory. Tetricus, captured, is treated with surprising leniency and even offered a post in the Roman administration. The empire is whole again. Aurelian is hailed as Restitutor Orbis, restorer of the world. Yet even reunification cannot mask the deeper wounds.
The economy is in shambles. To address the crisis, Aurelian reforms the currency, introducing a new silver coin, the Antoninius, with higher purity. He tries to curb inflation and strengthen food supplies by centralizing the grain dole. He also initiates important religious reforms, promoting the cult of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, as a unifying imperial faith. It is one of the first attempts to bind a fractured empire with a single, state-sponsored religion. Despite his victories and vision, Aurelian's reign is brief. In 275 CE, while preparing a campaign against Persia, he is assassinated by members of his own staff, misled by forged documents accusing him of tyranny. One of the greatest emperors of the century dies in a betrayal from within. His death plunges the empire once again into instability. In the 5 years that follow, a series of short-lived emperors ascend to the throne. Tacitus, Florian, Probus, Carus, Numerian, and Carinus, names lost to most, but each holding power for mere moments before being struck down. But change is coming. In 284 CE, in the eastern province of Nicomedia, a man rises who will not just restore Rome, but reinvent it. His name is Diocletian. And with him, the 3rd century crisis will come to a close.
284 CE. After decades of chaos, a soldier from the Balkans rises above the bloodshed. His name is Diocles, born into poverty near the Dalmatian coast. Not of noble blood, not raised in the capital, he climbs, one rank at a time, through discipline, intelligence, and political cunning. When Emperor Numerian is found dead, his corpse rotting in secrecy, Diocles seizes the moment. He denounces the Praetorian prefect as the murderer, has him executed in front of the army, and is hailed as emperor. But he does not keep his birth name. He takes on a new title, imperial, powerful, Roman, Gaius, Aurelius, Valerius, Diocletianus. Diocletian. He inherits not an empire, but a carcass. Rome is barely holding together. Since 235, emperors have been rising and falling at the whim of the army. Civil wars, plagues, invasions, inflation. Whole regions have broken away. Loyalty to Rome is a fading memory. Diocletian understands. If the empire is to survive, everything must change. The government, the economy, the military, even the identity of Rome itself. First, he transforms the office of emperor. For centuries, emperors portrayed themselves as first among equals, heirs to republican ideals. They walked the streets, wore togas, sat among senators. Diocletian ends this illusion. He adopts the model of Oriental monarchy, regal, distant, absolute. He wears jeweled robes and golden crowns. Subjects must kneel before him and kiss the hem of his garment. He becomes not merely an emperor, but a dominus, a lord. This is the birth of dominant Rome, a new imperial culture built on hierarchy and awe. Next, he addresses the empire's greatest weakness, its ungovernable size. For too long, a single man has tried to command from Britain to Syria. No more. In 286 CE, Diocletian appoints his trusted general, Maximian, as co-emperor, the Augustus of the West. Diocletian governs the east from Nicomedia, Maximian the west from Mediolanum, modern Milan. Each has authority over half of the empire, but Diocletian remains senior in rank. Still, he sees that even this is not enough. In 293 CE, both Augusti appoint junior emperors, Caesars, to aid them. Diocletian selects Galerius, a fierce Balkan general. Maximian names Constantius Chlorus, a competent administrator and father to a boy named Constantine. This system of 4 rulers, 2 Augusti, 2 Caesars, is known as the Tetrarchy. Each rules a quarter of the empire with its own capital, army, and administration. But they act in concert. Their portraits are minted together, their decisions made collectively. The empire is now a bureaucracy of emperors. Diocletian reorganizes the empire's administrative map. He increases the number of provinces from about 50 to over 100, making them smaller and easier to manage. These are grouped into 12 dioceses, each overseen by a vicarius. A complex pyramid of governance now stretches from emperor to governor to village. Laws become more uniform, taxation more consistent, corruption harder, but not impossible. The military is also restructured. The old system, stationary legions guarding far borders, is no longer enough. Diocletian creates 2 forces: limitani, the border guards, entrenched in frontier forts; comitantes, mobile field armies that respond rapidly to internal or external threats. New roads are built, fortresses strengthened. The empire begins to resemble a fortified garrison, ready for siege at every border. But the empire's deepest wound is economic. For decades, the Roman coinage has been debased. Silver denarii reduced to bronze. Inflation spiraling. Diocletian introduces a new gold coin, the aureus, and attempts to re-establish trust in imperial currency. He reforms the tax system, linking it to land and population, what you own and who works it. A massive census sweeps the empire. Peasants and landowners are registered, yields measured, assets cataloged. Taxation is no longer annual guesswork. It's scientific, brutal, and mandatory. But money remains unstable. In 301 CE, in a desperate attempt to control prices and wages, Diocletian issues the Edict on Maximum Prices. It is one of the most detailed price controls in ancient history. Thousands of items are listed: grain, meat, wine, clothing, shoes, labor, and given fixed prices. Merchants who violate the edict face death. But markets do not obey edicts. The law fails catastrophically. Goods vanish. Black markets boom. Officials are bribed. Eventually, the law is abandoned, but not forgotten. And then comes Diocletian's most infamous legacy, his war on Christianity. By 300 CE, Christians number in the millions. They are no longer fringe cults in dark corners. They are bishops, traders, soldiers, many in high office. Their refusal to worship the emperor or perform sacrifices offered the old Roman order. To Diocletian, and especially to Galerius, this is a threat to imperial unity. Religion must bind the empire, not divide it. In 303 CE, Diocletian issues the first edict of persecution. Churches are ordered destroyed, sacred texts burned, assemblies banned. Then comes the second edict, clergy arrested. The third, clergy must sacrifice or face torture. And finally, the fourth edict, all citizens, regardless of rank, must publicly sacrifice to the Roman gods. The result is brutal. In cities across the empire, Christians are imprisoned, flogged, tortured, burned. Some recant, others choose martyrdom. In North Africa, Carthage, Antioch, Alexandria, the blood of martyrs stains the stones. But persecution does not break Christianity. It strengthens it. The Christian communities become underground networks of loyalty, resilience, and hope.
And when imperial favor finally shifts, they will rise again, stronger than before. Meanwhile, Diocletian prepares his exit from power. After 20 years on the throne, he does what no Roman emperor before him has done. He retires. In 305 CE, he and Maximian both abdicate simultaneously. Their Caesars, Galerius and Constantius, are elevated to Augusti. Two new Caesars are appointed, Maximinus Daia in the east and Severus in the west. It is, in theory, a seamless transfer of power. Diocletian retreats to his palace in Spalatum in modern-day Croatia. There, surrounded by gardens and marble halls, he lives out his final years far from the throne. If once urged to return to politics, he reportedly said, "If you could see the cabbages I grow, you would not ask me to take up the burden of empire again." But Diocletian's carefully constructed tetrarchy will soon unravel. Ambitions rise, loyalties shift, the children of emperors refuse to be denied their inheritance. Among them is a young man in the west, raised in the court of Diocletian's own Caesar. His name is Constantine, and soon the empire will change again. This time, forever.
306 CE. The Roman world is on edge once more. Constantius Chlorus, Augustus of the West, dies while on campaign in Britain. His troops, fiercely loyal, immediately proclaim his son as the new emperor. His name is Constantine. But Constantine is no ordinary heir. He has spent years as a hostage in the court of Diocletian, watching the tetrarchy function and fracture. Now, with his father dead, the dream of orderly succession collapses. The tetrarchy is over. The struggle for the soul of the empire begins. By 308 CE, the empire is a chessboard of rival claimants: Constantine in the west, Maxentius in Rome, Licinius in the Balkans, Maximinus Daia in the east, and Galerius, the senior Augustus, attempting to hold it all together. It's a political free-for-all. Allegiances shift, treaties form and dissolve. In this chaos, Constantine fights battle after battle, gradually securing Gaul, Britain, and Hispania under his control. But his true moment comes in 312 CE. Rome, the eternal city, is held by Maxentius, son of the retired emperor Maximilian. Maxentius rules with cruelty and corruption. He has lost the support of the Senate, of the people, even of the gods, some whisper. Constantine marches on Italy. In his path lie fortress cities, Verona, Aquileia, and finally, Rome itself. Outside the city, on the banks of the Tiber River, Maxentius prepares to defend his throne. He builds a temporary bridge to control the crossing. He invokes Rome's traditional gods. He consults the Sibylline books, ancient oracles of fate. The prophecy is clear: the enemy of Rome shall perish. Maxentius assumes victory is his. He is wrong. On the night before battle, Constantine claims to see a vision, a sign in the sky above the setting sun, a cross of light, and the Greek words, "In to nika," in this sign, conquer. He consults his Christian advisors. They tell him the symbol is the Chi Rho, the first two letters of Christ's name in Greek. The next morning, Constantine orders his soldiers to paint the symbol on their shields, a new emblem for a new Rome. On October 28, 312 CE, the armies clash at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Constantine's forces rout Maxentius. As the enemy retreats across the Tiber, the bridge collapses. Maxentius drowns in the muddy water, his body fished out the next day. The eternal city opens its gates. The Senate hails Constantine as liberator. And with this victory, Christianity has found its champion. But Constantine is not yet sole emperor. In the east, Licinius and Maximinus Daia remain. To secure his rule, Constantine allies with Licinius. In 313 CE, the two men meet in Mediolanum, modern Milan,
and issue a decree that will shape world history. The Edict of Milan. For the first time in Roman law, religious freedom is granted to all. Christians may worship openly. Their churches and properties are restored. Persecution ends not by slow erosion, but by imperial command. The empire that once crucified Christ now protects his followers. But the peace is fragile. Maximinus Dio rejects the edict. War breaks out in the east. Licinius defeats him, briefly holding the empire together again. Yet as Constantine consolidates the west, tensions grow. By 324 CE, Constantine and Licinius are at war. The final civil war of the Roman Empire. Constantine wins a decisive victory at the Battle of Chrysopolis, near Byzantium. Licinius surrenders. Initially spared, he is later executed, perhaps for plotting rebellion. For the first time in over 40 years, one man rules the entire Roman world. Constantine is not just another victor. He believes his success is ordained by God. He is emperor by divine providence, not Jupiter, not Mars, but Christ. He begins to shape the empire, not merely in his image, but in the image of a Christian world. Churches are built across the empire. In Rome, the first St. Peter's Basilica is constructed over what was believed to be the Apostles' tomb. In Jerusalem, Constantine's mother, Helena, now a devout Christian, oversees construction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Christ was said to have been buried and resurrected. Bishops are summoned to court. Christianity, once outlawed, becomes the favored religion of the emperor. Clergy are given tax exemptions. Christian symbols appear on coins, banners, even imperial regalia. But Constantine's conversion is without ambiguity. He retains the title Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of Rome's traditional religion. He delays baptism until his deathbed, and while favoring Christianity, he does not outlaw paganism. To Constantine, unity, not purity, is the goal. He is as much a politician as a prophet. But as Christianity grows, so do divisions within the church. Theologians argue bitterly over doctrine. Is Christ of the same substance as God the Father, or created by him? The controversy, known as Arianism, threatens to divide the faith. Constantine, ever the unifier, intervenes. In 325 CE, he summons the First Council of Nicaea, the first ecumenical council in Christian history. Over 300 bishops gather. They debate, vote, and declare that Christ is begotten, not made, of one substance with the Father. This becomes the foundation of the Nicene Creed, a declaration of Christian orthodoxy that endures to this day. But Constantine's most lasting legacy is not theological, it is geopolitical. Rome, the ancient capital, is crumbling. It is bloated with bureaucracy, prone to riots, and far from the frontiers. Constantine seeks a new center, strategic, defensible, imperial. He finds it in the east, on the site of ancient Byzantium. In 324 CE, he begins construction of a new capital. Over the next 6 years, artisans, architects, and engineers transformed the small Greek town into a city worthy of emperors. In 330 CE, Constantine formally inaugurates Nova Roma, New Rome. But the people call it something else. Constantinople, the city of Constantine. Built on the Bosporus, it commands both Europe and Asia. It boasts palaces, forums, churches, aqueducts, and a mighty wall. It is the gateway between East and West, and for over 1,000 years, it will stand as the heart of Christian civilization. By the mid-330s CE, Constantine is aging. He divides the empire among his 3 sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans, hoping to avoid the chaos that plagued past transitions.
but the seeds of rivalry are already planted. In 337 CE, Constantine falls ill near Nicomedia. On his deathbed, he finally accepts baptism, fully committing to the faith he had long protected. He dies on May 22, 337 CE, at age 65. His body is brought to Constantinople, laid in a mausoleum among 12 empty sarcophagi, one for each apostle. There, he lies in the center, as the 13th apostle, the chosen emperor of a Christian age. With Constantine's death, the empire is no longer merely Roman. It is Christian, imperial, and divided by faith, blood, and power. But the road he set in motion will echo for centuries. Rome, once a pagan republic, is now ruled by emperors baptized in the name of Christ. And Constantinople, not Rome, will carry the imperial flame into a new world.
337 CE. The death of Constantine the Great sends ripples across the empire. His three sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans, inherit a Roman world reborn in Christianity but fractured in politics. They divide the empire among themselves, but the unity their father tried to preserve proves fragile. Within 3 years, a brutal civil war leaves two of them dead. Only Constantius II remains, ruling over a troubled but still immense empire. From now on, the Roman Empire will teeter between fleeting moments of consolidation and long stretches of disintegration. In 361 CE, Julian the Apostate, nephew of Constantine, becomes emperor. An unusual figure, philosopher, soldier, writer, he tries to restore pagan traditions, calling himself a champion of the old gods. But his reign is short. He dies in battle against the Persians just 2 years later. From here, emperors come and go and Rome's strength continues to slip. In 379 CE, a general named Theodosius, a Spaniard by birth, is elevated to Augustus by Gratian, the Western emperor. Theodosius inherits the eastern half of the empire, based in Constantinople, and once again a Roman leader tries to put the pieces back together. Theodosius I is the last man to rule both East and West as a single emperor. For a time, it seems the Roman world may recover, but this unity proves to be a final gasp. Theodosius fights hard to defend the borders. He defends Christianity, too, with zeal. In 380 CE, he issues the Edict of Thessalonica, declaring Nicene Christianity the official state religion of the empire. Pagan temples begin to close. Sacrifices are banned. Orthodox Christianity is no longer just protected, it is enforced. By the end of his reign, Christianity is the dominant force in Roman society, but the political structure that supports it is crumbling. When Theodosius dies in 395 CE, he divides the empire permanently between his sons, Honorius in the west, Arcadius in the east. This is the true moment of final East-West separation. Though they will speak the same language for now, their destinies begin to drift apart. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its wealth, fortified capital, and deep resources, endures. But the West, exposed, under-defended, and hollowed out, will not survive the coming storm. And the storm begins with a people on the move. The Goths, a Germanic tribe, once served as allies and mercenaries. But in 376 CE, tens of thousands of Visigoths, fleeing the ruthless advance of the Huns from the east, seek asylum across the Danube. They are allowed in, barely fed, poorly treated, and taxed beyond reason. Tensions rise. In 378 CE, the Visigoths rebel. At Adrianople, Emperor Valens leads a massive Roman army to crush them. Instead, the Romans are annihilated.
Valens is killed, his body never recovered. The Battle of Adrianople marks a turning point. For the first time in centuries, a Roman emperor falls to invading barbarians in pitched battle, and the myth of Roman invincibility is shattered. The Visigoths are now permanent players in the empire's affairs. In 410 CE, under their king, Alaric, they march on the Eternal City itself. For 800 years, Rome had never fallen to a foreign foe, not since the days of Hannibal, not since the sack by the Gauls in 390 BCE. But now, with imperial power broken and the army stretched thin, Rome lies exposed. On August 24, 410 CE, the Visigoths enter the city. For 3 days they plunder and burn. Churches are spared, some citizens are protected, but the symbolic weight is enormous. Rome has fallen, not just a city, but the idea of Rome. The empire staggers on. Weak emperors rise and fall. Real power lies in the hands of generals and barbarian warlords. The West is becoming less Roman and more Germanic. Meanwhile, the Huns, led by the fearsome Attila, press into Gaul and Italy in the 440s. Attila is known as the Scourge of God. He commands a confederation of warriors from the Eurasian steppes. He extorts Rome, burns cities, demands tribute. In 441 CE, he is stopped not by a Roman emperor, but by a Roman general of barbarian descent, Flavius Aetius. At the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, a coalition of Romans and Visigoths defeats the Huns in one of the bloodiest battles in antiquity. Attila retreats. A year later, he marches on Italy, but is turned back once again, this time by famine, disease, and a famous diplomatic meeting with Pope Leo I. Soon after, Attila dies suddenly, reportedly from a nosebleed on his wedding night. His empire collapses, but Rome's respite is grief. By the mid-5th century, the Western Empire is in terminal decline. Britain is abandoned. Gaul fractures. Spain and North Africa fall under barbarian kings. The Vandals, a Germanic tribe who had crossed from Spain to Africa, establish a kingdom in Carthage. From there, they build a fleet, and in 445 CE, they sack Rome again. This time, the looting lasts for 2 weeks. The word vandalism is born from this event, a legacy of destruction that echoes to this day. The empire is now a shadow. Its armies filled with foreign mercenaries, its economy devastated, its emperors puppets. One such puppet is a boy named Romulus Augustulus, placed on the throne in 475 CE. He is not truly recognized as emperor by the Eastern court. He is just a placeholder, controlled by his father, a general named Orestes. But in 476 CE, a Germanic warlord named Odoacer, once a commander of the imperial army, demands land for his troops. Orestes refuses. Odoacer revolts. He captures and kills Orestes, and on September 4, 476 CE, he marches into Ravenna and deposes Romulus Augustulus. The boy is spared, sent into exile. There is no great battle, no final speech, no last stand. Just a resignation, a quiet end to what once ruled the known world. 476 CE. The Western Roman Empire is gone. No more emperors in Italy, no more senate with real authority. Rome's territories now belong to barbarian kings. Yet the idea of Rome does not die. The Eastern Empire, based in Constantinople, continues. It still calls itself Roman. Its people still speak Greek, but refer to themselves as Romaio, Romans.
It will survive for another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. And the Roman Church, once persecuted and marginalized, now stands as the only stable institution in the West. Popes take on the role of leaders in the vacuum of empire. Even Odoacer, the man who ended Roman rule in the West, does not declare a new empire. He sends the imperial regalia to Constantinople and rules as a king of Italy under the Eastern Emperor's nominal authority. In a strange way, Rome never truly dies. It transforms from empire into idea, from a city of emperors into a memory of civilization.
476 CE. In the West, the Roman Empire is gone. But in the East, it survives. And not just survives, thrives. The city of Constantinople, built by Constantine, stands strong. Its walls are unbreached, its treasury still rich, its armies intact, its emperors still crowned with Roman tradition. To the people of this empire, they are not Byzantines, they are simply Romans, and they will continue to call themselves Romans for the next 1,000 years. The Eastern Roman Empire is smaller but more defensible. It stretches from the Balkans to Anatolia, from Syria to Egypt. It speaks mostly Greek, not Latin. Its culture blends Roman law, Hellenistic philosophy, and Christian theology. And its capital, Constantinople, becomes the beating heart of the medieval world. Strategically located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, it commands trade, diplomacy, and war. But the Eastern Empire is not without danger. To the north, Slavs, Bulgars, and steppe nomads. To the east, the powerful Sassanid Persian Empire. And soon, a new force will rise from the Arabian deserts, Islam. Before those storms break, a single man rises to restore Rome's lost glory. In 527 CE, Justinian I becomes emperor. A peasant's son from the Balkans, he is ambitious, educated, and deeply devout. His reign marks the last great attempt to restore the full Roman Empire. Beside him stands his brilliant and formidable wife, Theodora. An actress by birth, she becomes co-ruler in everything but name. Together, they transform the empire. Justinian's first goal, reconquest. He turns to his general, the legendary Belisarius, a military genius. In 533 CE, Belisarius sails to North Africa and defeats the Vandals in mere months. Carthage is Roman again. Next, he invades Italy, still ruled by the Ostrogoths. From 535 to 554 CE, war rages across the peninsula. Rome is retaken, lost, and retaken again. Cities are ruined, populations decimated. But by the end, Italy is back under imperial control. Even parts of southern Spain are reconquered. For a moment, it seems the old empire is reborn. But it is an illusion. The wars are costly. The plague strikes in 541 CE, the plague of Justinian, killing perhaps a third of the population. The treasury is drained. The reconquered lands are hard to defend. But Justinian's true legacy lies not just in conquest, but in law, architecture, and faith. He orders the Codex Justinianus, a massive project that compiles and clarifies centuries of Roman legal codes. This Justinian code will shape the laws of Europe, Byzantium, and even modern civil law systems for centuries to come. He also builds magnificently. After a riot burns much of Constantinople in 532 CE, Justinian rebuilds the city in splendor. At its center rises a new cathedral, the Hagia Sophia. A vast dome suspended seemingly from heaven, it is the largest church in the world for nearly 1,000 years. A masterpiece of engineering, art, and devotion. When Justinian first enters it, he exclaims, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." But even the greatest reign must end. Justinian dies in 565 CE, and his empire begins to shrink. In the coming centuries, Byzantium faces constant pressure. The Persians invade. Then the Arabs, carrying Islam, sweep across the east, conquering Syria, Egypt, and North Africa. The empire loses some of its richest provinces. But Constantinople holds. In 674, and again in 717, Arab fleets attempt to take the city, but the Byzantines unleash a secret weapon, Greek fire, a combustible liquid that burns even on water. The Arab sieges fail. The city survives. Meanwhile, in the west, the empire is forgotten. In 800 CE, Charlemagne, king of the Franks, is crowned Emperor of the Romans by the Pope in Rome. The Holy Roman Empire is born, a clear challenge to Byzantine legitimacy. The Byzantines refuse to recognize this barbarian emperor. To them, there is only one Rome, and it resides in Constantinople. But the schism grows. By the 11th century, the Christian world is divided. The Great Schism of 1054 splits the Church into Roman Catholic West and Eastern Orthodox East. The Byzantines and Latins now pray in different languages, with different rites, and mutual suspicion. The break is not just theological, it's political and cultural. And it has consequences. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Western European knights, meant to reclaim Jerusalem, divert to Constantinople. Driven by debt and intrigue, they sack the city. The sack of Constantinople is brutal. Churches are looted, relics stolen, emperors exiled. For over 50 years, the city is ruled by Latin crusaders. Though the Byzantines retake it in 1261, the empire is broken. It never truly recovers. By the 14th century, Byzantium is a shell of its former self. Constantinople is still majestic, but surrounded by enemies. To the east rises a new power, the Ottoman Turks. In 1453, they launched their final assault. The young Sultan, Muhammad II, only 21 years old, brings tens of thousands of troops, giant cannons, and a vision to make Constantinople his capital. The Byzantine Emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologus, prepares for the final defense. He knows he is outnumbered, but he will not surrender. On May 29, 1453, after 53 days of siege, Constantinople falls. The emperor dies sword in hand. The ancient walls are breached. The last Roman capital becomes Istanbul. After 1,500 years, the Roman Empire is finally gone. Or is it? Because Rome did not vanish, it transformed. The Orthodox Church survives. Greek learning, Roman law, and Christian theology spread through Eastern Europe. The czars of Russia claim to be successors, calling Moscow the Third Rome. In the West, the Catholic Church still speaks Latin, still sits in Rome, and still calls its leader Pontifex Maximus. The laws of Justinian echo in legal codes from France to Latin America. The dome of the Hagia Sophia inspires architects for centuries, seen in cathedrals, mosques, even government buildings. And in every language, The word empire is still understood through the lens of Rome. From a tiny city on the Tiber to the might of Caesar, from Augustus to Constantine, from Justinian to the fall of Constantinople, Rome endures. In stone, in scripture, in song, in languages, in laws, in legends, not as a nation, but as an idea. Rome is eternal.